back. I'm your host, Brian Abushakar, and on this week's episode, we will be reviewing Through the Looking Glass, the finale for Season 3 of Lost. We open up to something very, very different in this episode. This is actually a flash forward, and we have hints throughout the entirety of the episode that tells us so. So pay attention to them. I'll be pointing them out throughout. So what we see in this opening is Jack is very distraught, very drunk. He's on an oceanic flight. He reads something in a newspaper, which causes him to drive around aimlessly in Los Angeles. And as Joey pointed out, this is one of the only, if not the only, scenes shot on the mainland instead of shot on location in Hawaii. So before he jumps, he mutters the words, "Forgive me." He sees a car crash, and Jack finally has something to fix, and his purpose has returned. This takes us onto the beach, where Sayid has a meeting with Jack and tells him that he is willing to give his life to secure rescue for the survivors. Just like Charlie, you can see that it is more important to these people to get rescue for everyone than it is to preserve their lives. It's a pretty heavy moment. We see Sayid redeeming himself for some of the things that he's done in his past as a torturer. Now, before I move on, I want to talk about how good the production of this episode is. I mean, all of Lost has always had really good production, but this one had such a great score. This is one of my favorite soundtracks to an episode ever. And the shots that they have in this episode are so cool. Like, I love when they're leaving the beach and you have that turn back shot where you see Bernard, Sayid, and Jin standing there holding it down. They look so fucking cool. This whole episode is so intense. I really love it. Now, I want to bring up something Naomi says to Jack as they're walking to the radio tower. She calls him Moses, and I felt like with all the name dropping we get in this show, we gotta look that up. But if you do recall, Moses had a brother. We actually learned this from Locke earlier on in the series, and Moses' brother is named Aaron. We learned previously in this season that Aaron is actually Jack's nephew, since Claire is his half-sister. So I think this is a nice little nod to that. And then, of course, I think it's also pointing out the obvious of how Jack is seen as a biblical person. And, of course, if you think about it, Moses was a shepherd, and that's Jack's last name as well. Fun little tie-ins throughout this episode. Now let's go down to Charlie in the looking glass, and we can see exactly where he's going to die in this scene. We see that yellow-red light that's flashing and where it's all going to happen. But what I really like about this whole part is that they call up for Ben, and all of a sudden, he's being caught in his lie about the station being flooded. Mikhail is standing with him, and he points out the obvious. And I love that he has Ben admit that he lied to everybody. And you can see that it bothers Mikhail, and he points out that, well, Juliet has probably screwed us in a few other ways if you think about it. He put loyalty and faith in her, but not in Mikhail, so he's putting it in Ben's face. Let's return to the beach, where we have our plan going down. They're going to shoot the dynamite at the tents that are marked for the others to come and take the women. The only reason I'm pointing this out here is that when Bernard says, "Please God," before he shoots, it just reminded me of how Michael had done the same thing at the end of season 1 of Lost. This takes us back to our flash forward, where Sarah comes in to check on Jack. She's still his emergency contact. He's in the ER after this accident, and you know she can tell that Jack is not doing well. She can see that he's been drinking. She asks him what he's been doing, and he continues to lie to her like he did before when they were together. As a result, I think she doesn't want to enable him because those same things led to Christian running himself to death. So she won't give him a ride, and she decides to leave. So now let's catch back up with the guys walking to the radio tower. Jack realizes that only 2 of the 3 explosions went off and has to take control of this situation. And we see that his bedside manner in this scene has gotten much better than it had in season 1. And he's really taking the role of leader in this case. He is going to get them off this island. He asserts that their plan needs to continue. They don't know that nothing went wrong. Maybe they only needed 2, but asserts that they will be okay. They have to move forward. And I really love seeing the motivation behind Jack here, because we hadn't seen much from him in the past few episodes at the end of season 3. He's been all over the place. He's been really subdued this season, and it's cool to see him come back in some full force with confidence. Let's now return to the Looking Glass, where Charlie is really putting it all on the line here. He's such a badass, will not budge to either of these two who have held him captive. He knows that he is going to flip off that switch and tells them point blank that this is going to happen because he knows it. Desmond's visions haven't been wrong yet, so he has to take a leap of faith and believe in him. Now let's return to the scene where Tom radios into Ben and tells him that they knew they were coming. And in this scene, it's revealed to Ben that Alex was the one who betrayed him and told them that they were coming early. This is really crazy. You're watching everything fall apart for Ben in this episode. Mikhail, his most trusted agent, has his loyalty shooken because he's being lied to. And now Ben is finding out that his own daughter is sabotaging his efforts to try to take the women from the survivors. You get to see Ben's desperation grow and grow in this episode, something I never really realized the first time I was watching through. I really thought he was in control this whole time. Now I want to bring up something in the flash forward here where Jack is holding the chart for the woman who got into the car accident on the bridge. I want to point out that his hand is shaking in this scene, and that was something that stuck out to me because when he was called in to take over for his father's hands were shaking, and that's how the nurse knew that he was under the influence. Also in this scene, we meet one of our first hints as to how this is an actual flash forward. This guy who steps in talks about being the chief of surgery, which, if you remember, was actually Jack before the crash. So this guy has come in and taken his spot. This is letting you know subtly that Jack doesn't really work there anymore. Moving along to the Looking Glass, Mikhail arrives and Charlie immediately starts pitting Mikhail against the two women down there because he knows that they have the drop on the situation. So he's really playing his cards well here. I love that when Mikhail calls though, you're watching Ben being so desperate and trying to figure out how to get the upper hand in the situation, trying desperately to get Mikhail to stay loyal to him, and tells him that he needs his help to clean up the mess that he's made, making him important. And I just want to point this out because the performance is excellent. And it's so cool to watch this guy really feel like he's going to lose everything and needing to do whatever he can to get it all back together. And then that will take us directly into the conversation Jack has with Kate, where he stands up for Sawyer, and she asks him why. Love that Jack just goes right for it and tells her, because I love you, as if he's got nothing to lose. He knows that when they get off the island, she's probably going to run. Honestly, that's probably the reason why he tells her. She's not going to stick around and be with him. He knows what she's going to do, so he's going to get it in now. Otherwise, he'll never have a chance again. I wanted to bring up the scene where Hurley wants to go help Juliet and Sawyer save their friends on the beach. He makes a very good point. They're my friends too. I want to do something, but again gets turned away. And this really comes back into play for Hurley's character in general, especially when you think about him making his own luck. What I think that means more than anything is that he needs to take his own initiative and take responsibility for everything he's doing and stop relying on other people to guide him. So now I want to bring up the scene where we see Locke in the ditch, and he's told by Walt that he still has work to do. And when you first kind of think about this, you would consider that maybe this is just a vision or something strange, but consider what Locke has been through and how the island actually can communicate with him in the way that Ben wishes it could. Maybe the island is telling him that he still has work to do, and especially what he ends up doing to Naomi at the end of the episode, I think that's really its intention. Maybe they're suggesting to us right now that they're not supposed to leave, and there are hints throughout this entire episode that Naomi isn't who she says she is to begin with. Really great playing of expectations and ideas in this entire season, and really coming into play a lot in this episode as well. Now I want to go to the flash forward to our next hint when Jack calls on his cell phone. I've told you before, and if I haven't, I'm telling you the first time. Check out cell phones to let you know what year it is. He's holding a Motorola Razr 2, which didn't come out until 2007, 3 years after the plane crashed on the island. Really cool that they put that detail in there, and this shows us our third hint that this is a flash forward, one that we didn't realize until much after the show had come out, but Hoff's Drawler is actually an anagram for flash forward. They do that a lot in this show. Anagrams are all over the place. It's a really great mechanism for them telling you what they're actually doing. Once Jack gets inside, he finds out that nobody else showed up, but we can see that he's in really bad shape. He's still popping pills. He's got this crazy beard. He's listening to Kurt Cobain on Kurt Cobain's death day. Thanks to Joey for pointing that out to us. April 5th is what the newspaper said, and that's the day that Kurt Cobain died. That's why he was listening to him. Which takes us back to the survivors getting to the radio tower. Danielle tells Jack that she refuses to leave because this island is now her home. And if you think about it, she's making a pretty good point. She's been gone for 16 years. Anything that she had to return to is gone. And she knows that her daughter is here anyways. She doesn't expect her daughter to leave the island, so she wants to stay here. I think there are a lot of reasons for her to call this place her home. But I wanted to point out that she accepts that this is the place that is now her home. So this will take us back to the Looking Glass, where we see Mikhail follow through with the orders as Ben directed. He takes care of the problem. Now, I did want to point out that when he shoots that first woman, he shoots her through the stomach. I pointed this out to you before. I think this is a symbol for the fertility issues that the women have, that it's their womb that eventually kills them. Now I want to get to the meeting between Jack and Ben before the radio tower, where Ben tries to convince Jack not to leave the island, asks for the satellite phone, and tells him he'll let bygones be bygones. But Jack won't budge. So Ben leverages his captive Bernard, Jin, and Saeed chip because he wants to make sure they don't leave. He says he'll kill them, but Jack absolutely won't budge. He fires 3 shots, and this whole scene really fucks you up. We'll now return to the Looking Glass, where Charlie realizes that it's his destiny to flip that switch. He finds out that the code was programmed by a musician. So on the keypad, he has to enter the numbers for good vibration, and nobody else would know those keys except for a musician. That's why Charlie's here. That's why Charlie's the only one who can hit the switch and stop the jamming. Now, before I forget, I want to bring up the storyline that's closed up for Danielle and Alex. Ben finally admits that Alex's mother is still alive and introduces her to Danielle. And this scene is so great. In the midst of all of these things that have been going on in this episode, we have this one storyline confirmed and tied up. And I think that's cool that they're checking certain things off the list. This shows you that they had planned to actually close these storylines up, not just dangle a carrot in front of you. What I love about Lost is that it seemed like there were things that weren't ever going to be answered, but the answers were always there. The answers are always given to you. I think, of course, there are always errors, but for the most part, they answer as many questions as they can. Now I want to return to the beach, where we get Hugo's shining moment in the series so far, where he runs over these others with his freaking bus. This scene is so great. You can hear the music from the bus coming up quietly and then getting louder before the scene starts. It's just so cool. Plus, it's Hurley who did it. Juliet and Sawyer didn't have any guns. They didn't have any plan. They were just gonna wing it against guys who were totally armed. And Hurley swoops in and saves the day. This scene is so freaking cool. Sawyer and Juliet get the upper hand, and Sawyer gets Tom back for stealing Walt off the boat. But I wanted to just point out to you folks, the look on Juliet's face when he's shot. She kind of has to realize what being one of these survivors is, which means this guy Tom, who for no other reason she had a problem with, she's got to be okay with him dying and watch him die. You can see the shock in her face. This will take us into our flash forward, where we see Jack stealing medication and total hysteria. This new doctor, this new chief of surgery, is just trying to help Jack by telling him, hey, let's sit down, let's talk. But Jack can't accept help, just like his father. When people, or in this case Jack, tried to help Christian, he pushed them away. And Jack is doing the exact same thing here. This takes us to the best scene ever, where Hugo radios in with great news that they won on the beach. They killed all the others, everybody was safe, Jack, who thought Bernard, Jin, and Sayid were dead, finds out that everybody's alive, and as all this is happening, Charlie, in the looking glass, flips the switch and is able to get receptions off the island. Just as that happens, there's an incoming transmission, and it's Penny, who doesn't know anything about this freighter or Naomi. And so now we know for a fact that Naomi isn't who she says she is. So who is Naomi? Why is she here? Who was she sent by? And what's going on? All of these great questions are coming to mind because they are supposed to. This is how you lead into another season. This is how you lay the foundation for good stories. Bringing up new questions while answering old ones. That way you're constantly moving and the pacing feels great. You don't feel like it's dragging or slow. This is why I love Lost, because it constantly set new things up while answering questions. Just as this is happening and Charlie realizes that this is not Penny's boat offshore, Mikhail shows up at the window after getting speared in the heart. I mean, really, how many times does this guy need to get killed? He shows up with a grenade, blows the hatch, and floods that room. And we now see exactly where Charlie dies. And this is maybe the saddest scene in the series to this point. We watch him drown, and in his dying moments, he writes, "Not Penny's boat," to warn everybody that Naomi isn't who she says she is. But before Charlie dies, he does the sign of the cross. We know that he was very religious. He would go to confession and was always a man trying to find his place with his faith. And before he dies, he is finally at peace. He has sacrificed himself to ensure that Claire is gonna get off the island. So far, all of their plans have worked. They are on a roll, and just as Charlie is passing, they arrive at the radio tower. And I really love this whole scene of Danielle coming back to this place that she hasn't been to for 16 years. I think it's hilarious that Naomi tries to use a satellite phone inside a concrete building, doesn't think to go outside to get a signal. She finally gets a signal out and gets knifed in the back. Locke is threatening to shoot Jack if he tries to go off the island, but he can't do it because we know he's not a killer. And he tells Jack that he's not supposed to do this, and Jack is finally able to connect to the freighter, and Locke leaves. Now, this raises a lot of questions again. So we got the transmission off the island. Who are these people on the freighter? Are they friendly? Are they not? That'll be seen in season 4. This will take us into our last flash forward, and the one that messed me up like crazy the first time I watched it. This shows Jack calling for a meetup at the airport, and when it's Kate who comes out of the car, I had no idea what was going on. The whole episode, they led me to believe that this was going on in the past, but it was all happening after they got off the island. And he's there to tell Kate that they made a mistake. He's been flying on flights every weekend to just try to crash back on that island, and he knows for sure now that they should have never left the island. And he tells Kate that we have to go back. And that is actually where we got the name of this podcast, because Eric loved that scene with Jack and his fake shitty beard, and he thought it looked hilarious and told me I should call this show We Go Back. Next week, we will be starting off on season 4. Between season 4, though, there are the mobisodes, these little mini episodes that they put originally online and included on the bonus features for season 3's DVD. You guys should check them out. We're going to watch them because they are considered part of the story and they fall in between here and season 4. So next week, we will be reviewing the mobisodes, all of them, and the first 2 episodes from season 4, which are The Beginning of the End and Confirmed Dead. Guys, email your thoughts, questions, theories, everything to wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear from you folks. And follow me on Twitter @KingLordBrian to stay up to date with everything going on in this show. And until next week, folks, thanks for sticking through. Love having you guys along for the ride, and we'll see you then.